Welcome to Big Blend Radio, where we celebrate variety and how it adds spice to quality of life. Welcome to Big Blend Radio, everybody. We're very excited because we've started a new series here on Big Blend Radio. It's called Main Streets, Historic Downtowns, and Villages. And we wanted to do this. Well, number one, I've got to give a shout out to Jeffrey Spear on the show today because he put this little bee in our bonnet. And it's something that really resonates. And we have been covering for years, but now we're doing this a little bit more of a concerted effort because it's so important to support our downtowns and our small businesses. And I think when a downtown is thriving, the community thrives, and it's also part of the landscape. It's part of preserving the history of a town and making it economically viable and fun. I mean, who doesn't like to walk through a historic downtown at night that has twinkly lights and maybe a pub that's got music playing, and then you go in, have a bite, and then you stroll down, and maybe your room isn't so far away. You know, maybe you're visiting someone who lives in a loft. See, I could do historic downtowns in a loft. That would be super cool. I would like the bar to be downstairs. Thank you. The pub can be downstairs, and I would like to live above that. That just sounds like a good idea. But we have great guests joining us. Stay tuned because in November, we will be putting out a special edition, a Big Blend magazine, digital magazine about Main Streets, historic downtowns, and villages. So stay tuned for that. And it'll be a really cool way to look at how we're going to shop during the holiday season. But right now, we're going to play Christmas in July and welcome back food writer Jeffrey Spear. You can go to his website, spearwrites.com. So welcome back, Jeff. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on. This should be fun.
Now, would you live in a loft if the pub was downstairs?
Well, I got to tell you, as you were mentioning that, I used to live in Australia, and going back a few decades, they had what they called the corner pub. And this was actually when pubs were hotels and the rooms were upstairs and the pub was downstairs, and I've stayed in them. And so absolutely, I'd live in something like that.
Heck yeah. I remember the series Absolutely Fabulous. And I think Patsy, the character, lived above a liquor store, which was a dangerous thing. So you know what she did every time she walked out? She helped herself to a bottle of vodka or whatever. But yeah, but this is such a cool concept to talk about and really do this series. As we started putting this together, I'm like, Jeff, you've created more work for us. Thank you. But this really is something cool to really showcase, because I think it's so important that we go to our downtowns, our main streets, and support those places, including restaurants for you, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, I know you're going to take us through the South. We can talk about Main Street America. Nancy and I were actually part of the Main Street program in Encinitas, California. And that was when we first started our magazine in 97. And we'd go to the meetings we called it DEMA, Downtown Encinitas Main Street Association. And it was really cool they really worked to getting the community together as well as the tourism people, which I thought was a really crucial part of what a Main Street is, wouldn't you say, bringing community and tourism together so everybody works in harmony. Sometimes there's some arguments and all of this stuff, but it makes for a more viable community and a healthier community. And
the thrust of the program is economic development. So absolutely what you're talking about, that has to happen. Community and tourism and, taking pride in this in your downtown, which may have faded a bit and needs to be refreshed and revitalized, but it's absolutely a joint venture in the community.
And it's also important to look at impoverished areas too, and not outprice people. You know what I mean? When you do these kinds of programs, that's why the community has to have a voice and not just tourism or realtors or developers. You know what I mean?
Not all the main streets are tourist destinations. They are revitalized communities, but they're not. You could go there and it would be okay, but they vary from place to place.
Mm-hmm. As they should. That's keeping integrity of sense of place, So I'm excited to hear about the places you've been to in the South. In fact, Nancy and I have been to 3 of them that you have done and covered. So I'm looking forward to talking about that. Now, we also have author Clifford Garstang on the show. You can go to his website, cliffordgarstang.com. And I know he's going to talk about Staunton, not Staunton, because I think I've always messed it up, and it's in Virginia, not West Virginia. Am I getting anywhere close? Cliff, welcome back.
You got it right this time, Lisa. Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
It's good to have you back on. I wanted to ask you about this whole concept of a downtown, a main street, a village, about keeping integrity with the actual community, not just the tourism sector. Because you travel the world and, I know you've been to European villages. Isn't it like the heartbeat of a community?
It totally is. I mean, if there isn't a core where people can gather and get to know each other and visitors can come and see the real place, then there isn't really much of a community. Until I moved here, though, I didn't really experience that because I lived in big cities abroad and in the US. And so it wasn't until I moved to Staunton that I really discovered what living in a community was all about.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. And that's the thing, because most downtowns, villages, main streets do have to have the people living there, like in the loft or, and around the corner in a house, that kind of thing. And a lot of people, their main streets sometimes were houses first, right?
Oh,
Depending on where they
absolutely.
were.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there is a tension even here between the longtime residents of the city of Staunton, which is not really a very big city. It's only 25,000 people, but also the development that has attracted both tourists and people who move here, a lot of retirees and so on. And that has caused a spike in housing prices that a lot of younger people and locals are not happy about. But we do all coexist, and there's something for everybody in downtown. As Jeff was saying, it really has to have a little of everything, and ours certainly does.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. And, I love the ones that are not built up to be too touristy either, that are very authentic. And I think as travelers, we like the authentic side, when things get too over cleaned up. And, I remember living in a historic community, mountain town, and it just had the integrity of what this place was, with the buildings coming from the 1800s, and it wasn't over perfect and polished too much. They did not allow chain shops to be in there or restaurants or anything. They had one, but when that contract ended, I don't know, somebody made a deal somewhere with someone for it to even be there. That was not renewed, and they knew it was going to be renewed. Even gas stations, none of it. So the main street itself, it's not a main street community, but it's downtown is what people go to because they know they're going to find unique things to buy. They know, the town hall is where a lot of the, concerts or events were done. The main street is an event place, and it kept its authentic character. But then, of course, there were some big city people that kept moving in and wanting to ruin the integrity. And that's why we have these, the historic preservation societies in these kinds of places too, that it's that balance of not letting your integrity to, you don't want it over edited, right? Cliff, you know about editing. You don't over edit it,
Right.
So yeah, it's like when you do plastic surgery and one day you wake up and you have no nose because you keep cutting at it. I'm going to get in trouble. So Matt, I'm going to you before I get myself in trouble on plastic surgery. Everyone, Matt is an very prolific author. You can go to his website, mattcost.net. And then when I said very prolific, I realized I have all these writers on the show, and I just said very prolific. That is not a term that you should use. Right, Matt?
Yeah, maybe we could go with extremely, terrifically, or fabulously.
Yes. But you shouldn't. Prolific means very, it's like one of those terms. But I know that we're going to talk about the connections. I know Cliff with Staunton. We're going to talk about that being connected to In an Uncharted Country, one of your books. But Matt, I know that your community, Brunswick, Maine, is connected to your books too. And as I was talking about the actual community being part of a downtown and not being over polished, you and your brother opened a video store, right? In Brunswick. And so you were bringing in that something that the community itself needed at that time. Rewind, be kind, rewind.
Yeah, absolutely. Back in 1991, I'd graduated college a couple years before, and my brother and I decided to open a video store in what was sort of a failing downtown Brunswick, Maine, on the only main street in the country, because it's spelled like the state with an E on the end of it. And we opened a video store that became pretty vastly popular in our small town of Maine and drew a lot of people down and led to the revitalization efforts of downtown. And it's now a thriving place. So that was my life in the 90s. long before I became a writer.
Wow. But running a video store, you get everybody's insight. Did that help with character development later about, what people rented and did they rewind and did they keep their, come on, you got to get the town scandal from doing that.
Yeah, no, it was a pretty brilliant thing because we were new to town, fairly new as Maine goes. We got to know everybody in town, which was really nice because at that point, just about everybody went to a video store at one point or another, and we became the popular non-franchise place to go. So the whole downtown of Brunswick would come to us, and we got to know everybody. It allowed us to open some other businesses, some that live on in the pages of my books.
This is very cool. All right, I want to bring our next guest on is travel writer Diane Dobry. And you can learn more about her on her two websites, gettinghungary.com, because she loves Hungary, the country, and its wine, and its food, and its people. And also follow her on discoverydaze.com. That's DAZE. So welcome back, Diane. How are you?
Hi, Lisa. Thanks for inviting me.
This is cool because I know we're doing a lot of New York because we're also doing a special publication on New York State, and that's where you are, is upstate New York, right? So when I think about New York, it's kind of interesting about when we look at villages and downtowns and main streets, because I think your state really has some of the historic villages. You've got Greenwich Village, right? And then you've got some of those really quaint downtowns, and then at the same time, the Main Street thing. So you have a good balance of all three things.
Yeah. And actually, I grew up on Long Island. So, there's some places that still have a downtown Main Street, but the one that I experienced the most was from Sag Harbor, Long Island. And since I've been back in New York upstate, there's a lot of historic stuff going on about the America 250 year, 250th anniversary of our country. Hope we make it. And Sag Harbor was a big, part of that. So not just a downtown, but also a historic location.
So what you say, Sag Harbor is more like a village? Because I think about like when we did this downtown Main Street, Oceanside, California is just above Encinitas on the historic Highway 101, which is an awesome road trip if you do California all the way up to Canada, pretty much. Highway 101 and 1. Oceanside also did that, but they had a harbor village. And so it was like this whole little collective. And in between that was what people needed for their boats. And there was lodging, there were homes, there were restaurants, shops, ice cream, and saltwater taffy, y'all. I'm just saying. So would you say Sag Harbor is more of that kind of village?
Oh, yeah, I would say so. I mean, there's the harbor where there's yachts and, a lot of celebrities are out in the Hamptons, and Sag Harbor used to be called the Unhampton when I used to go out there in the 70s, but it does have some, like an umbrella house that was part of the War of 1812, still has some of the scars of being shelled, but it's got these historical buildings that I think sometimes the new groups that come in, they look at the chic shops and the restaurants and just the whole vibe of the coffee shop and the boutiques. And I think they don't really know the whole history of, the buildings and the whaling. Whaling was big in 1800s, but the Battle of Long Island took place in Sag Harbor. That was one of the places in 1776. So it's been quite the place.
Well, I think that's the thing is about keeping that balance where the community may want super other things, and then it's like you want to keep that historical story there. That's the town's story. And there's many stories in history, right? As we always talk about New York State is you got to go to anywhere in this country, go to the indigenous peoples first, and so then we come in and go, hey, we want a downtown. And I think of, downtowns like in villages and little historic downtowns, there's old towns like Tombstone, Arizona was built up by tents. They had a tent city going on. And at the same time, there were restaurants in these tent cities, and they even moved their location because the mine things changed. And here we are because their little town started to slowly, people would start putting buildings up, but they're serving clientele, and they were dressed up la-di-da in the desert, right, of Arizona, Tombstone, Arizona, Wyatt Earp and all those guys out there. And they're serving, what are they serving, Jeff? Oysters. So I know we're talking about oysters on another show, but that's what they were doing. Yeah, oysters because of the No, the real sea, from the sea. They got them because of the railroad. And so the railroad, I think, helped with some of these downtowns. And, when we look at the history of where they're being formed. But Sag Harbor, that's some of the oldest history beside the indigenous people that we have in the country, wouldn't you think? As a
Yeah, well,
downtown.
actually, the name of Sag Harbor came from the Pequot people called it this popular tuber, I guess kind of a potato kind of thing, was called a sag. So it was called the Harbor of Sag. So that's what Sag Harbor means. And then they had, when they were doing whaling in the 1800s, the natives would go and spot whales and let the townspeople know there's whales out there, and they'd all go out in their boats and their and get the whale oil and the scrimshaw and, the bones for the ladies' dresses and stuff. So they kind of worked hand in hand with the natives that were out there.
Oh my gosh, the corsets made out of whale
The
bone.
corsets, yes.
Who invented that? Only a man could have invented that. Sorry, guys on the show, but
Careful.
I'm
Keep
just
that
saying,
waistline thin.
I know I'm already in trouble again on the show, but come on now. That who wants to wear that? That's insane stuff, And then, walk downtown and all right, get in a buggy and a carriage and try to, it's why women were passing out everywhere. But, they had the vapors. Matt, I wanted to go back to you. So you had the video store in downtown, in Brunswick, right? So This was actually was it like a Main Street USA, or is it Main Street because it's in Maine with the E on the end? But did it become like a certified Main Street from the Main Street Association?
Yeah, no, it's absolutely the Main Street of Brunswick, Maine. And we just, somewhere along the line, somebody had the unique idea to name it like the state. But it is a very unique downtown with wide sidewalks and trees and shade and storefronts and little shops and, no big box stores. So it's absolutely a fabulous little town in Maine with a great main street.
And now what about, you opened a fitness downtown too, right?
The video store was very successful, so we went on and opened a fitness studio downtown, which was just off Main Street.
Cellar? So, did you have wine? So after you worked out, you got wine?
No, it was not a wine cellar. It was a gym that was actually in the cellar, but I like the way you think.
Well,
we did also open a mystery bookshop where we would have art openings and wine tastings and things like that. The Coffee Dog Mystery Bookshop. So you might have enjoyed that more, Lisa.
I think I've read about it.
You have. I have a mystery series set in Brunswick, Maine, and I changed the names of all the places in downtown, so I guess so that I won't get sued by them if something bad happens at their establishment. But I did keep the Coffee Dog Mystery Bookshop true to its name because I figured I wouldn't sue myself. So Goff Langdon is a private investigator but can't really afford to make a living in Brunswick, Maine. So he opens a mystery bookstore, and between the two of those things, he's able to make a living.
Yes, I mean, because there's PI work going in there, and there's all kinds of stuff going on. And then there are places to go for cocktails, I believe, in some of the books I've read.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, Goff Langdon likes a cocktail or two, or maybe even three.
Mm-hmm. And there's dogs involved too. And a lot of you put dogs in we like this. We like the dogs. And that's the other thing. A lot of main streets and downtowns, like when I think about Encinitas, California, when we were on that, watching, they started with flower baskets downtown. Then it was the events became part of, even though some of them had, been going on, the street fairs and everything like that were part of becoming this, Main Street, thriving Main Street. And it was it's cool. I like Main Streets when you have the boutiques, Diane's talking about sometimes it gets all fancy, but I just like the ones where it's I just need to go buy a shirt real quick. I don't want it to be so la-di-da. You know what I mean? There's this balance of it all. But it's interesting how it all develops with the different kinds of businesses that go in there. Cliff, I wanted to go back to you in Staunton, Virginia. How is that connected to you in an uncharted country? Does that take in the downtown part of it?
It sure does. Before I moved here, I thought I would be writing. In fact, I had been working on a novel set in Southeast Asia. But when I moved here, I needed to work on some short stories, and living in a town like this was so unusual to me. It really opened my eyes to a lot of different things. So I was really inspired by some of the small town events. And one of the stories in that book is set in an antique store, not too dissimilar from an antique store that I used to visit downtown. Lots of downtown events are in that. In fact, there's one story that's also set in a coffee shop downtown. So it just opened my eyes to things that I was not familiar with. And so I wrote about it.
And the coffee shops are great. Dive bars and coffee shops are fantastic to get to know a town.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, everybody comes in at some point or another. And so I like to work in coffee shops too. Right. But it's a little tricky because people come in and they know who I am and I end up talking a lot. So that's not always good.
Or you're people watching more than writing. Well,
Right.
and you've got a couple of bookshops too, because I always want to give a shout out to bookstores because it's so important to keep, our libraries, which, I just can't even fathom the idea of no libraries, or even more being cut away. But the libraries and the bookshops, this is really why I want to keep doing this series. Again, all Jeff's fault, which this is a good thing. We like Jeff because he gives these ideas and it's like, oh, wait, we really need to do more of this because, the bookshops are a different experience. And I'm not knocking Amazon. We've got authors on this show, not knocking it. And ebooks are, fantastic. I mean, there's, I know that the sales of books are pretty, here's audio, there's hard copy, paperback, and then you've got your ebooks, and the ebooks are right up there, and so are audiobooks, and so it's for whatever everybody wants. But there is something about going into a bookshop where it becomes an experience. So when you're shopping for a book online, it doesn't feel like an experience to me. This is just me personally. But when you go in a bookshop, and sometimes you'll find used books as well, which I don't know. I've got a thing about used books. It's interesting, especially if people write in them. I'm like, what were you thinking? So I'm nosy that way. But I don't know, there's an experience where you tend to pick up a book you never thought you would be interested in or just page through. I don't know. And even the smell of a bookshop is good to me. That sounds
I
weird.
agree.
Okay, I'm not that weird then. All right. Okay.
No, and I totally agree too. I think a small town downtown needs to have at least one bookstore. We're really fortunate here to have two bookstores on our main street, which is not called Main Street, although it used to be called Main Street. It's now called Beverly Street. But anyway, we have two stores that sell new books. They're quite different in vibe from each other for a lot of different reasons. But the Book Dragon is one that opened a few years ago, and it's a lot of fun, and it's sort of a lighthearted feel when you go in. And the other one, it has a more serious feeling to it. It's run by a woman from Europe who has sort of literary tastes that I appreciate. So they're different stores, and they cater to different clientele. And we also have used bookstores too. Both of those stores have events that draw people into town, lots of book clubs and book discussion groups. And gosh, I love those stores. So they're very important.
Yeah, just as are our libraries. I was going to say too, in the episode notes of the podcast are links. So check those links out. We've got links to visit I almost did it. Staunton.com. I also will put in some information for Brunswick. We'll put in some information for Sag Harbor. I know Diane's got a lot of content that she's written as well. And then, oh boy, Jeff's got all these articles that are publishing over time, but you could go to his website, spearofrights.com. But I'll put some links in there for these cities as well that he wants to talk about because I think this is so cool. Easton, Maryland. Nancy and I went there a couple years ago during the pandemic, stayed at a beautiful Victorian bed and breakfast called the Hummingbird Inn. And it was Halloween, of course, right? So it was all decked out with dead bodies and gravestones and all kinds of cool stuff. But this downtown to me was so special because the bed and breakfast was he has this huge porch, and the downtown had all these little events, and it connected the locals with the visitors. His front porch, we enjoy every night we were there. We had wine time with the locals and the people staying there. It was amazing to see. You could go down from your room at 10 o'clock and someone sitting on his porch talking with somebody. And it was just super cool to see that kind of connectivity, and a lot of people coming from DC too, which was interesting because some of them were interested in the world of politics. But anyway, we won't go there. But Jeff, did you feel that same kind of vibe in Easton? That kind
Yeah,
of
Easton's one of those
mixed?
charming little Eastern Seaboard towns. It's got its history. What I found most amazing when I was doing the research to write about it is there's this company called Blue Point Hospitality, and they have established all these restaurants and bars in the city or in the town. And they've got Bar Rouge and the steward. But the chef at Bar Rouge is this guy named Chef Hartley Pete. And he is he was voted James Beard 2024 James Beard Best Chef Mid-Atlantic. And so you go to his restaurant, you go to the others. And I asked them, I said, do people come here and just spend all night eating in the one place? And they go, no. They do like a culinary crawl. They go to this place for a little bit, and then they go to that place for a little bit. And so you can have a wonderful experience just wandering around town and drinking and eating and meeting people. It's great.
And they have a lot of history, like you were saying.
Yeah.
Out there. And that's why they've got a wonderful Rails to Trails park, and there's an old depot, and then you can go jog off all the food that you ate, Well, we did. Oh my gosh. At that bed and breakfast, are you kidding? You know what he made? He made bacon, candied bacon with Old Bay seasoning, big, thick pieces of it. And you would have, I think he did like a creme brulee, and then in this glass were these huge pieces of bacon. And then he says, do you want a peach Bellini? And since we all were out there very late at night talking on the porch of Easton, of course, we had a Bellini and then maybe another one. Shh, don't tell the doctor. But I think it was just that the food was a big deal there, like what you're saying. It's a huge deal.
Blue Point Hospitality really changed the complexion of the area because they lifted the bar, and so now everybody there is trying to have really good culinary experiences along with really good tourism experiences.
Okay, so now let's go from the foodie to the Bourbon Trail. So Bardstown, Kentucky is on the Bourbon Trail. A lot of history, a lot of museums that we've been to there, and one of the only private arboretums in the country or in the state.
The Arboretum. You got me on that.
We went to the Arboretum. It's got one of those giant trolls. You know those huge trolls? Yeah, It's got huge trolls. Anyway, they've got trolls in their Arboretum in Bardstown. This is not in the Main Street area. But Bardstown is, Bourbon. And when I remember not actually having time to be in the downtown because we were doing the museum stuff and playing with trolls. But it looks so charming and like very Southern, but also European to me in a way.
Yeah. What got me about Bardstown and what stopped me cold, and I said, okay, this is a place that's worthwhile, is it's known as the bourbon capital of the world. So if you like the brown liquor, this is the place to go. It's on the Bourbon Trail. Right in proximity of Bardstown, there are 11 local distilleries, and all the bars have a collection of bourbons to try. So you don't, there's just so much to offer. But the only thing that really, aside from the bourbon, one of the places is the bar at Willett. And they're known for having the best egg salad sandwich ever. And I want to know, okay, how good is this? It's got to be a phenomenal egg salad sandwich. So I haven't had it yet, but it's on my list.
Ah, I know. We're going to be doing an egg show soon, too. Yeah. People aren't throwing their eggs around anymore. That's for sure. This is interesting because you're bringing up the food and the drink and everything. So I want to go back to everyone here and hear about like a food and a drink from the downtowns and villages that they're talking about. So I want to go to you, Cliff. What are you going to say like for Staunton? If I do not look at the word Staunton, I'm fine. I can say Staunton. It's the Staunton thing that gets me, how it's spelled. But what would you say is a really good representation of the culinary side of Staunton?
We have an amazing variety of restaurants from high end to low end. One of my favorites is a restaurant called Zinadoa, which is a traditional spelling of Shenandoah. And it is farm to table, great food, great atmosphere, good drinks, best cocktails in town. But then we also have lots of grill places, fish, steak, that sort of thing. Several new entries are pizza.
Yay.
I mean, we've always had pizza, but now we've got some fancier pizzas, so that's great. There are some wine bars that I go to a little too often, probably. Last night, tomorrow night, the next night probably. Anyway, they also have really excellent food, one that's sort of European because the owners are European, and they have lots of homemade tapas and pinchos and various other European dishes. But maybe the standout in town is one that I haven't been able to get to yet. It's called Maud and the Bear, which is by also a James Beard winning chef, Ian Bowden. And he does these very elaborate tasting dinners. And I have heard that it's unparalleled. It's just fabulous. So I can't wait to get there.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, Jeff, I think you may need to go to Staunton. I'm just saying.
It sounds like it's definitely going to be added to the list.
And there's pizza, so we know we're safe.
And I might have to get a prescription to Wegovy to compensate.
Yeah, here we go. Here we go. So, Matt, let's hear about Brunswick, Maine for food. I mean, is lobster somewhere involved in this?
I was going to bypass lobster and go into oysters.
Back to oysters, Jeff. Take good note.
Oysters have become very big in mid-coast Maine, and is probably some of the best oysters in the world are being harvested. And, so plenty of places have oysters. We've got some really famous restaurants, even tied down in Portland. And you put that together with a nice bourbon sangria, and life is good.
Bourbon sangria now. So you might need to go to Bardstown.
Yeah.
But I know you'll only go in winter. He's not going to go to the South anywhere in summer. That's not his thing, right?
Or spring or fall. Maybe the very dead of winter, it will be cool enough down south where you all live.
Okay, there it is. He's a true Mainer. Everyone, on August 5th, we have a show celebrating oysters because it's National Oyster Day. So, Jeff, I think you need to go to Maine.
There are oysters all over the country that are fabulous. And so on the show, we'll talk about the different varieties that you can find here, there, and everywhere.
Awesome. We have Chef Ivan Flowers. He's also going to be part of that, and he's a 5-star chef, and he's runs seafood restaurants and all kinds of restaurants, and he's going to teach us the do's and don'ts of oysters and how to know if they're safe to eat, because apparently that's a thing too. You want them fresh, right? So he's going to talk about that. So that's exciting for coming up for August 5th, everyone. But now we're going to go to Diane. So Sag Harbor, what are we eating?
Well, of course, there's clams. I remember when I was growing up and we would go to Sag Harbor, Noyak Bay, a short drive from Sag Harbor. That was one of the things we did, was go clamming, or we would go get mussels from there. But you could definitely get clams. I'm sure there's lobster that they bring in. But as far as you were talking about the drinks, you're in the Hamptons. That's a great wine region for New York, is out east on Long Island. So there's a nice wine shop right near the supermarket, very conveniently located. And when I was importing Hungarian wines, they had my Hungarian wines in that wine shop. But there's a lot of coffee going on there. I used to go there for a lot of different things, there for Easter or something. They would have like a lot of, good American traditional meals, with the lamb and turkey. And the American Hotel has some really good traditional meals. One of the cool things about going to the American Hotel is there's all these teeny little tables for 4, and you'll go there and you'll see like a newscaster from, New York, or Billy Joel has been spotted sitting out there. And a lot of celebrities go to the American Hotel, I think, just to be seen. But, and then there's a place you want to know where to get a drink. The Corner Bar is on the corner, and it's called the Corner Bar, and it's still there. I've gone there. Another place is a nice Italian restaurant that's called Il Cappuccino. That's been there since, when I was a kid. My parents would go there and they're like, oh, we saw, I'm trying to think, Paula Prentice and Dick Benjamin, if you know who they are from back in the day. And George Siegel would be eating in there. So it was like, not only is it really good food, you have, there's so much to do. They're just walking, even just getting a bagel or something in the morning. There's like a nice used to be the American Deli or the Sag Harbor Deli, and now it's, I think, Pear something. But I'm looking at online because a lot of the places have turned over and now they have a different name from the last time I was there.
Well, is the bagel thing, because I have never had a bagel in New York State
Oh
or
my God.
city? Is because so like that's the thing. Is it really true that no matter what, because they're sending him over and flying him here and there or whatever, or they're locally made in different places. This is kind of going back to our pizza conversation. But is a bagel in New York better than other places?
Yeah, I think Long Island and New York City or the New York boroughs are kind of in competition. But when I go to Long Island, I'm upstate. I've lived in Florida for the 8 years before this, and it's just there's not the flavor anywhere else. I go to Long Island and I will walk to the bagel store. I will get not just bagels, but Kaiser rolls, which are the nice crusty rolls with almost like I think it must be cornmeal or something on them. They're just so quintessential Long Island that, when I put a picture of my egg sandwich on a Kaiser roll or my bagels and, butter melting on it, people are like, oh, so when my son did come and visit me upstate recently, and I'm like, bring bagels and Kaiser rolls.
Oh, wow.
It's, in fact, I wish he would just mail them to me sometime.
You can send them to me too. I want to try them. Now, Jeff, I have to go to you now because, Jeff is in Florida. He's in Jacksonville. So I know that you taste food around the world. So what about bagels?
The bagels here are terrible.
I can vouch for that.
I grew up in Baltimore and we had pretty good bagels. And I haven't quite gotten to the point to say that the New York, Long Island bagels reign supreme, but there is definitely a difference. I mean, when Lender's bagels hit the supermarket, that's when people just they should have been thrown out right from the very start. I mean, it's just not a proper bagel.
Well, so there we go. Okay. So the bagel thing is for real. So, well, we'll have to do it on National Bagel Day, whenever that is. But okay. So, speaking of Florida, I know you talked about this on our road trip show, and we have so much happening with that road trip show, turned into another big thing. But this is the Park Avenue District, which is part of Winter Park, Orlando. This is her hometown here, her old hometown.
I left there. I miss it.
So everyone's always connecting. Normally Cliff has, been exactly where everyone else has been. So I don't know, Cliff, have we had any of those moments yet on the show? Because normally you've lived somewhere where someone's been.
No, not today, but I do see a note in the chat that Jeff is going to come to have dinner at Maud and the Bear, so we'll connect here.
Cool. Okay, there you go. But so Park Avenue District, I know you were talking, isn't this where the Tiffany lamps were?
Yeah, that's the Charles Hosmer Morse Museum of American. The Hosmer Museum of American Art. It's an incredible collection. I had no idea that Tiffany was so involved. This is Louis Tiffany, that he had such an involvement with so many different kinds of artworks. And it wasn't just the lamps and it wasn't just the windows, but they have an altar there from some World's Fair or something that he created. But it's really fascinating, the breadth of what he's done. So it's a very cool museum.
Now you brought up museums, so that's an important thing to bring up about downtowns, because when I think of Julian, California, where we had apple pie, it was known for all of that. It's in San Diego, and it's this little Main Street, right? This is the town I was talking about that just had this integrity, and and it had some grit to it too. So if you made it fancy, it's not going to make it, because that's just not who it just isn't. It's kept to its true character. Let's put it that way. So apple pie is a big deal there. But they have a pioneer museum right there in the downtown, and they also have a museum that's attached to that is like showing people how pioneers and homesteaders lived up in the mountains, because this is a mining town. And then it turned into being, when the gold panned out, apples and pears took over, and then we got wine and, shenanigans. It turned into a little party town. It was fun. It was a fun town to live in. Nature and, forests and gentle four seasons. It was one of the best places I've ever lived in my life. As just, you could go downtown and they have, an old soda fountain, which used to be the old drugstore before those were taken away. But that's the thing about even keeping the building of what was and letting that story be. I think like if a generation from now, they're not going to know about old drugstores and soda fountains. And, that's why the museums are important. So that's cool about the Tiffany glass. Did you do any museums in the places you're talking about today? I know you've got Park Avenue district. So you did one there, Bardstown, Easton, Hammond, downtown in Louisiana, and Macon.
Well, I didn't focus on them. I mean, the Tiffany thing was pretty special. Most of these places are historic. And so they have either a visitor center or history center or something that talks about all of this stuff. But museums in particular, I'm a food writer, so I can go into a town and just eat my way down the street. And if there's a museum along the way that looks interesting, it's like, all right, I'll walk in there and have a look, but where's the next restaurant?
Okay, yeah, there you go. But that's who you are. That's your thing. I want to go around the room real quick again about the museum. So, Diane, you talked about in Sag Harbor that you've got a lot of history in museums that show the whaling history, right? So that's you're pretty covered there for
Yeah,
museums.
there's a whaling museum, actually. It was one of the first museums I went to. But there, I mean, just the buildings themselves are, there's monuments, there's actually Sag Harbor is in the National Register of Historic Villages. So there's still a lot of, like, the Whalers Church. It's like an Egyptian revival. It had this huge spire on top, and the 1938 hurricane took everybody by surprise. They didn't have, any kind of warning, and the whole spire fell off the building. So they've been trying to fundraise for years. Apparently, they haven't put the spire back, but that's one of their goals, is to put the spire back. There is a fire museum because Sag Harbor was the first place in New York to get a fire department, because in the 80s, there was a fire that burned down a lot of homes and buildings on the Main Street. So a lot of the buildings that are there now are from the 80s, at least on Main Street. So they were given the, permit to create the first fire department in New York State.
Wow. We were in Waco, Washington State. And so it's part of 101 too, part of the Lewis and Clark Trail. And it's, of course, got a harbor village there. But we were pet sitting, obviously, as we travel, right? And we were taking care of a puppy that was across the street from the fire station. So I was like, oh, well, we're pretty safe, until they told me, oh no, the fire station's just rebuilt because it caught on fire. I was like, dudes, come on now. Real quick, Diane, you were saying that Winter Park has a history museum.
Yes, right? It's a big one-room history museum. I went in there, just hang out there. It's right overlooking the Central Park at the very far end. I don't remember which end it is, north or the south, but it's they had the Rat Pack would go there because they had, Sammy Davis Jr., Frank Sinatra, and all those guys would hang out there and stay there. They had old hotel lobby and bedroom displays of what it looked like there was I'm trying to remember. I think one of them was the Paradise Hotel, and that's still there on the corner. You can stay there, but I hear it's very noisy because it gets, talk about the being over a bar,
cool.
Being there. It's if you want to sleep, that's not the place to go. But they do change their theme from year to year, but they do have a lot of history on that time of,
That's interesting. So, Matt, do you have any museums in your downtown? Your Main Street area?
We do, but I want to circle back just a second to libraries, which is like museums.
Yes.
Well, as you know, one of the things I do as a writer is I do book talks, cost talks, and I probably get to 30 to 40 libraries a year. And going to these libraries in all these towns, small towns, big towns, it's, usually the center of town. It's the coolest building. And it's kind of the nucleus that binds or glues that whole town together. Libraries are very cool in that perspective. So I just wanted to come back around because we flirted with bookstores and libraries and veered off onto bookstores and kind of forgot about libraries.
Can't forget about libraries. Can't. No, they're important. It's almost like when they build a town that they go and put in a courthouse because now things are getting real, Well, it's true. They have a jail, then a courthouse, and that's when a town is getting serious and there's some kind of investment going in. And, then, they hire Cliff because, you know, he comes from a legal background. And then you need the library because the laws keep changing. You need all those legal books, right, Cliff? That's how we get our libraries, right? But no, they're important. What about Staunton for your downtown? Is it museums, libraries?
Museums and libraries. So the best known museum here is actually not right in downtown. It's the Frontier Culture Museum, which is an outdoor living history museum. But in downtown, we have the Woodrow Wilson Birthplace and Presidential Library, since he was born here. That's right downtown. We also have a camera museum, which is cool. It used to be a camera shop. Not much call for camera shops these days. So they have this amazing collection of antique cameras, the very beginning of cameras right up to the present. And we also have, speaking of fighting museums, we have a small museum attached to the fire station downtown, which has the only, if I can get this right, the first motorized fire engine in Virginia. I think that's what it is. And speaking of courthouses, so we're building a new courthouse, and we have this beautiful old courthouse right in downtown. So that's going to become a museum. So that should be very cool.
This is exciting. You know, I think I love to hear about, you know, courthouses. They keep a lot of history, and they actually used to be an evacuation place for hurricanes in some towns I've been to. In Louisiana was one. And they had what to do during World War II things, because they were doing the Louisiana maneuvers in this area in Leesville and near Fort Polk in Louisiana. So it's kind of interesting, all these stories that are tied to courthouses and libraries and things like that, you know. But the camera museum, that is so fascinating. So Matt, did you ever think about doing a video museum? You know?
No, I hadn't really contemplated that before, but we do have some museums up here in Brunswick as well. We have the Joshua Chamberlain House, which is another book that I wrote about Joshua Chamberlain, and some, Penobscot Historical Society and the Harriet Beecher Stowe House. So we got a bit of history up here in Brunswick.
Oh, we got to give a shout out to Harriet. Yeah, exactly. No, I mean, now I feel like we need to go on a road trip, like up your way. We haven't been up your way yet, or even we've been near Cliff, but not quite there yet. We'll get there. But Jeff, I'm going to go back to you. See what happens every time you're on a show. Now here comes things get bigger and longer because we just get excited about everything. But so some history, that's great. So we'll get you to a food museum. I know that will work for you, right? A food museum,
I'm happy to go to a food museum. They're always fun.
Okay, well, there's an ice cream museum in New York City.
I've heard about that one.
Yeah, and you get to name your own. Yeah.
Not that it's in this country, but I went to a very interesting chocolate museum in Paris.
That is not a bad thing to do. That's okay. That's okay. And a Bourbon museum in listen, every distillery is a museum, as far as I'm concerned, and an important part of American history. I'm just saying, it is. So I wanted to go to Hammond, downtown development district in Louisiana. Hammond is not far from New Orleans.
It's about 45 minutes away, I believe. It's an interesting place. This is probably one of the Main Street communities that's really about revitalization and economic development. It doesn't have the same kind of charm and flair and kind of the allure that some of these, certainly like Winter Park has or Bardstown, but it has a lot of interesting things going on. And in particular, because I like the food, it's got all this Cajun Creole influence. And so there's a lot of really good food to be had there. And I learned about, I'm going to butcher, I think it's pronounced Boudin. Really cool stuff. Apparently, there's this place called Bayou Boudin that's it's in an old gas station, and they make the sausage and the balls and meat pies and other Cajun things. And it's like, this is why you go to these places, because there are these charming little details that are worth adventuring, worth encountering.
Well, there's a gas station food trail that goes through Louisiana's no man's land. Oh. And the no man's land is when, it's like the Louisiana Purchase and all the wars that happened, and basically everybody was fighting over everything. Then the Battle of New Orleans, and if I say anything more, I know Matt, who's a former history teacher, will yell at me because I'll be wrong. But Anyway, there was no law and order for 3 years in Louisiana at this time. And it really goes from Shreveport all the way down to about Leesville, I'd say, Natchitoches, Louisiana. Alexandria is part of it. So they created a food trail, gas station food trail, because you go into a gas station in Louisiana, you get lunch, you get a box lunch. Like, it's like cooked food, po' boys, that kind of thing. Boudin, if you're in the southern part of Louisiana, boudin is everything. And you'll get that in Lafayette. Go to any gas station in Louisiana and you will get good food. At the same time, I've been into a downtown gas station in Ajo, Arizona, tiny little town, old mining town on the border of Mexico, and had some of the best burritos in the gas station. So just say gas stations, some of them, don't poo-poo it until you go in, and then you may want to. But, you may not either, depending on where you go. I've had some of the best food out of a gas station. Seriously. And if you go to Natchitoches, Louisiana, which has an amazing historic downtown district, they fought to keep their brick streets, which I think is amazing to see. Like Texas, where we are now, some of these old downtowns still have their old bricks. And the women of the town of Natchitoches, they wanted to come in and pave it and take away all these historic bricks. And the women all got together, sat in the street and lay down and wouldn't let them do anything. And so that's how they kept their bricks in Natchitoches, Louisiana. Going to Natchitoches, Louisiana, they are famous for their meat pies. And their meat pie, you can get them in the downtown, you can get them in all kinds of places, but one of the best places is in a gas station. Well, actually, you'll get them all over, now that I think of it. But the French Market Express, if anyone goes to Natchitoches, Louisiana, you must go there. They're also famous for yam cakes. So anyway, you got us off on food, Jeff. Got me on a tangent. Sorry. Where are we going now? Macon, Georgia.
Can I mention one thing about Hammond before you move on?
Okay. I went away. Hold on. So, Jeff, we're going from Hammond to Bacon? Macon? No, sorry, Bacon.
Bacon.
Well, before we go over to Georgia, sticking with Louisiana, just talking about the economic development that these main streets are about, it has a very impressive statistic. The place was founded in 1818. But as recent as 1984, they had an 80% vacancy rate in their Main Street area. And as a result of the program, it's 6% today. Huge economic boost. And that's a big part of what these programs are about.
No, you're really right. You're really right. It gets things turned around and saves these towns, like the actual buildings as well. So I know I should give everyone the website too, mainstreet.org. If you go on there, you'll find all kinds of main streets and places for, especially while you're doing your summer road tripping, right? Or for the holiday season shopping, and they're good to go all the time. But Macon, Georgia, I'm excited about this. We've been there to see our friend Joey Stuckey, who is the music ambassador of Macon, Georgia. He has his recording studio right in the downtown. It's also connected to a theater area, and I think they have like a player piano going downtown or something. Did you see that, Jeff, when you were there?
No, but it has a huge music history. It's the home of Otis Redding, Little Richard. A lot of people talk about the fact that the Allman Brothers Band started there. There's a restaurant. It's like George Washington slept here. In some of these places, they say, oh, well, these musicians were here. So it's a cool thing.
Well, yeah, the Allman Brothers died there on that one bridge. They had a motorcycle crash. And so the bridge is named after them. And then somebody else died there. But anyway, not to get into that sad part, but the downtown is cool. Did you eat any food there? You had to, man. You're in Georgia.
Yeah, there's always good stuff to eat, So sampling my way through. That's part of visiting these places. Is they're charming, they're historic, they're vibrant, and there's everything from casual coffee shops to high-end restaurants. And if they happen to be in a place that has kind of a regional specialty like the Cajun Creole in Louisiana, in Macon they've got the southern food, and so. If that's what floats your boat, you get the fried green tomatoes and the pimento cheese and the fried chicken and all that stuff.
Well, you also have Waffle Houses.
I know the franchise.
No, but listen, I have a thing, because once you go west too far, you lose the Waffle Houses. And I'm sorry, but there's certain things that are, I know it sounds weird, but I have friends that go celebrate Valentine's Day at Waffle House every year because they have a Waffle House thing. No. I know it sounds silly with franchises and everything, but there's some of them are just part of it. And it's a good place to people watch. So that's the other part of it.
I've done it at 2:30 in the morning. So yes.
Yeah, me too. Especially when I was doing live music. Yep. Waffle Houses saved everybody. So the good places. But I'm glad you've been to all these downtowns. I know that you've got a lot of stories coming out. And everyone, thank you so much for being here on the first step of a series of Main Streets, Historic Downtowns and Villages. I know Jeff can come back on and share some more insights on some of the towns. He didn't get to talk that much on all of them, but you've got a lot of downtowns that you've covered. And then as we're talking, I'm like, oh, I've done this one too. And your brain starts to realize how many we've all been to. So as we close off, I want to have each of you tell me one downtown that you have been to that you want to talk about next time, or that you have not been to anywhere in the world or across the country that you want to know more about, so that we can keep planning on this. So I want to go to you, Diane. Is there one that you would want to talk about or go to?
Oh my gosh, you got me. I was thinking while you were talking, I was thinking of St. Augustine that I've been to, but I always go back to like also Hungary when you're talking about the food. You know, they have the wine and the agriculture museum there. I mean, any of those two.
Yeah, cool. She's going back to Hungary. And everyone, keep up with Diane at gettinghungary.com and discoverydays.com. That's with a Z. So thank you, Diane. I know we're going to be doing more with you covering New York State. So everyone stay tuned for that as well. So Matt, what about you in closing? Any downtowns you want to go to, or another one that you want to recommend?
I mean, I would certainly say that Budapest and St. Augustine were two great choices. I love both of those downtowns. And I like my own downtown of Brunswick, but lately I've been looking into Raleigh, North Carolina as a slightly larger venue, and I'd like to explore that more.
There are some cool little village areas in Raleigh. Yeah, there are. That's such cool history in North Carolina. Very cool history. Everyone, mattcost.net is the website to go to. You've got a new book coming out, right?
Yeah, I just had a book come out in April, and I have another one August 13th called Glow Trap.
Glow Trap. I know. So it's not a Friday the 13th.
No, it is the sixth book in my Clay Wolf Trap series, which is loosely based on the town of Booth Bay Harbor, but I call it Port Essex.
There you go. There you go. Cliff, everyone, you can go to cliffordgarstang.com to get his books, and especially go get In an Uncharted Country. Again, that is connected to Stanton, not Staunton. So, Cliff, any recommendations of another downtown or village, or do you want to go somewhere that you haven't been yet?
Since Matt mentioned Raleigh, I also like some cities in North Carolina and their downtowns. Winston-Salem has a terrific arts district in downtown, a bunch of breweries, great restaurants. It's a really nice place. But I also recently did a book event in near Annapolis, Maryland, and I stayed downtown in Annapolis, and it's got a great downtown.
That's cool. Well, I got to give a shout out to Asheville, North Carolina. I know we have friends coming on to talk about it, but you were talking about bookstores. In downtown Asheville, North Carolina, there is a bookstore that has a champagne bar. I'm just saying, it's important. Jeff, everyone go to spearwrites.com, and that's where you can keep up with all his different articles. And so as he writes about all these towns that he was talking about, you'll get even more knowledge from that. But Jeff, what are we talking about next time on Main Street? Because you started this, so, you know.
Well, I'm going to Lafayette in a few months, and so I'm very curious about that. And I've already plotted out a culinary crawl from the hotel that I'm staying at in about a 5-mile radius, and to try all the interesting things that are there, including the boudin balls.
Okay, well, I cannot wait for you to have the boudin. I can't wait. It's going to be fun to talk about. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us. We have many more shows coming up and guests, so stay tuned. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you, Lisa. That was fun.
Thank you for listening to Big Blend Radio. Keep up with our shows at bigblendradio.com.